Okay, so trying to keep up with everything happening in AI right now, it just feels like drinking from a fire hose.
Oh, absolutely. The sheer volume, it's kind of staggering.
Yeah, and for this deep dive, we've really waded through a ton of sources, subreddits, Twitter, Discord.
A huge amount.
Exactly. Just trying to pull out the really important nuggets from the AI news, specifically from June 9th and 10th.
And what's amazing is how fast things are moving.
Mm-hmm.
Not just like on one front, but across the board, models, infrastructure, how the tech is actually being used.
Right.
So our mission today is basically to cut through all that noise for you, give you a clear shortcut to the key stuff from those 2 days.
Okay, so we're going to zero in on some big model announcements, maybe some interesting infrastructure progress.
And what the big players, like Apple, are up to.
Gotcha. Okay, let's unpack it. Starting with the models, OpenAI made a move that felt, well, pretty significant.
The price cut.
Yeah, that huge price cut, like 80% off their o3 input tokens, down to $2 per million.
Which, when you look at what others are charging for similar models, GPT 4.1, Gemini, Claude, it really looks like a direct challenge.
Totally feels like they're trying to kick off a price war, doesn't it?
It really does.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just the price slash either. They also rolled out o3 Pro.
Right, the supposedly more capable version.
Yeah, although initial reports suggest the benchmarks for Pro were a bit mixed.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently the API had some, let's say, temporary hiccups around the launch, too.
Ah, okay. So it kind of highlights that constant tension, pushing innovation fast versus keeping things stable and performing well for developers.
Exactly. Always a balancing act.
And OpenAI wasn't the only one making waves with new models. Mistral AI jumped into.
Right, with Magistral. They're
Yeah.
calling it their first dedicated reasoning model.
Interesting positioning.
Yeah.
And they did both open source and closed source.
Yeah, Magistral Small, that's the open one, 24 billion parameters, and then a closed medium version.
So connecting that to the bigger picture, it seems like the model race isn't just about raw size anymore.
Definitely not. Companies are trying to differentiate on specific skills, like reasoning, and making strategic calls on what's open and what's proprietary.
Though I saw some chatter that Magistral Small's initial benchmarks maybe didn't quite top some of the Quinn 3 models.
That's what some reports indicated, yeah.
Yeah.
It does raise that interesting question about how different architectures are stacking up against each other right now. It's constantly shifting.
Totally. Okay, so beyond the models themselves, there was also a lot happening on the infrastructure and tool side, the stuff that makes building and deploying easier.
Yeah, that's crucial.
We saw updates to LangGraph, right?
Yeah.
Which seems to be showing real promise for building more capable AI developer agents. That
Yeah.
feels very practical.
Very practical. And SkyPilot, which helps manage compute across different clouds,
Yeah.
that's now integrated into AWS SageMaker Hyperpod. The idea is making access to that processing power much smoother.
Okay, lowering the friction there.
And speaking of hardware, Modulars showed off some pretty big performance gains running their stuff on AMD hardware.
Oh, interesting. Diversifying beyond just NVIDIA.
Seems like it. And they even previewed support for Blackwell, which is NVIDIA's next big thing.
Wow. Okay, so all these infrastructure and tool updates, they really point towards the industry focusing hard on making AI deployment
Why?
easier, more efficient.
All of the above.
Mhm.
And accessible on different kinds of systems. Plus, you're seeing more focus on data curation too. New data sets like Myriad, Neutron Personas.
Right.
And even interest in courses specifically on AI evaluation. That signals that how models perform in the real world and how you measure that properly is becoming absolutely critical.
Yeah, it's moving beyond just can it do the task to can it do it reliably and efficiently in a real system. That makes sense.
Exactly.
And building on that, we saw some specific practical use cases pop up or show real progress.
Like what?
Well, Llama Index highlighted some practical document agents, things that can actually understand and work with your files.
Okay. Useful.
And Kling AI and VO3 showed pretty impressive steps in video generation, especially with character consistency, which has been a sticking point.
Yeah, getting characters to look the same across shots is tricky.
And a really concrete example, Sakana AI partnering with a major Japanese bank. That feels significant.
Definitely. Shows these models are starting to move past the demo stage and into real enterprise workflows, handling sensitive stuff.
Right, moving up the stack from base models to actual applications.
You can't really talk about big strategic moves without touching on Apple's WWDC announcements.
Yeah, WWDC seemed like a mixed reaction online.
Some of the UI changes got criticism, sure, but they also introduced MLX, their own machine learning framework for Apple Silicon.
Okay, optimizing for their own hardware.
And they announced Safari getting web GPU support, Mac OS getting native Linux container support, it clearly signals they're pushing hard to make AI development and deployment better and more native on their platform.
Makes sense. So, pulling this all together, what does this really mean for you listening? We've got companies slashing prices, new models focused on specific skills like reasoning,
The underlying tools and infrastructure are maturing, making deployment easier.
and the big tech players are definitely positioning themselves strategically. This isn't just abstract news, is it?
Not at all. This constant stream of updates, it directly impacts the tools you might use or maybe even build with.
And it's fundamentally shifting the whole tech landscape right under our feet.
It really shows both that, well, breakneck pace of innovation, but also the very real practical challenges of getting this tech reliable and actually into people's hands or into businesses.
It really does. And it makes you think. Sam Altman keeps predicting intelligence will become like too cheap to meter.
Right.
But then you see all this concurrent discussion about the massive energy consumption of AI, plus the really complex ethical questions around creating believable AI personas.
Yeah.
What does that tension, between super cheap capability, high resource cost, and these big social implications, what does that mean for how AI is actually going to weave itself into our daily lives soon?
That's a huge question, and all these updates just make it feel even more pressing, don't they?
They really do. Something to keep thinking about.